The jungle was never quiet. Strange birds screamed from the canopy. Insects buzzed like broken wires. The air was thick, heavy, and wet, but tonight something felt different. The silence between the noises was too deep, too sharp, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. The human Daniel pushed himself up from the muddy ground. His ship had burned in the sky and fallen apart before his eyes. Somehow he had survived the crash. His clothes were torn, his hands cut, and smoke still clung to his hair. He had no weapon, no food, and no clear way home. Only the endless alien jungle around him. He staggered forward, using a broken branch to steady himself. The plants were strange thick vines glowing with faint blue light, leaves big enough to cover his whole body, flowers that pulsed as if they had a heartbeat. He had trained as a soldier once, but no training could prepare him for this world. Then he heard it, not birds, not insects. Something heavier. A dull thud that made the earth shake under his boots. Once, twice, then again. Each step came closer. Like a giant beast walking slowly through the forest. Daniel froze. He crouched low and pressed his back against a wide tree trunk, its bark damp and soft. His breath quickened. Another sound followed, the cracking of wood. Trees were bending, snapping as something large forced its way forward. The ground trembled. Leaves fell like rain. Daniel's heart hammered. He had seen alien creatures before, but nothing this big. His mind whispered one thought: run. He turned, ready to sprint deeper into the dark, when a new sound reached him. A voice, deep, powerful, but strange. Like thunder wrapped in silk, the voice echoed in the jungle, rolling through the air. He could not understand the words, but he knew the tone. It was a command. Then another voice answered. Higher, sharper, full of fire. The two voices clashed, echoing back and forth. Daniel's skin prickled. His instincts screamed danger. These were not animals. These were intelligent. He edged forward, pushing aside a glowing fern to see. And then he saw them. Two shapes moved between the trees. At first, only shadows taller than the trunks, broad-shouldered, graceful but terrifying. As they stepped into a clearing, the moonlight revealed them. They were women. Not human women. No, they stood 12 feet tall, their skin smooth like polished stone, glowing faintly with a silver hue. Their hair was long, flowing like rivers of fire and ash. Their eyes burned, one pair golden, the other deep crimson. They were beautiful, terrible, and powerful all at once. Daniel's mouth went dry. He had fought soldiers, seen monsters, but nothing like this. The golden-eyed one pointed toward him. Her lips moved, and her voice struck the air like a drum. The crimson-eyed one stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Her snarl was low, dangerous, almost animal. Daniel realized she was not protecting him. She was challenging the other. The air grew heavy. The ground shook again, not from footsteps but from the force of their rage. Birds fled from the trees. The jungle seemed to shrink away from them. Daniel crouched lower, heart racing. He should run. He should hide. But he could not look away. The two giants stepped closer to each other. Their eyes locked, their voices rising in a storm of sound. Daniel could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. They were fighting. Over him, the golden-eyed woman raised her arm, muscles rippling like living steel. She reached forward as if to seize him. The crimson-eyed one blocked her, slamming her hand into the earth with a thunderous crack that split the soil. Daniel stumbled back, covering his ears as the sound rang like a cannon shot. Dust rose, leaves flew, and trees trembled. The golden-eyed one hissed, baring teeth sharp as blades. She struck at the other, her hand moving faster than lightning. The crimson-eyed one caught her wrist. The jungle shook as they struggled, their strength bending. Reality itself. Daniel fell to the ground, staring in shock. His body was so small compared to them. One wrong step, one careless move, and he would be crushed like an insect. Still, their eyes flicked back to him again and again. In those burning gazes he felt no mercy, no kindness. Only possession. The golden-eyed woman shouted a word that rang like a hammer against stone. Her body glowed brighter, veins of light crawling across her arms. The crimson-eyed one answered with a roar, her voice splitting the night, her hair whipping like a storm around her. The ground cracked beneath them. Daniel knew one truth. This fight was not about territory, not about dominance of the jungle. It was about him. He tried to crawl away, dirt clinging to his hands. But the golden-eyed woman saw him move. Her hand broke free from the struggle and shot forward. Her massive fingers reached through the air like a cage. Daniel gasped, rolling aside just as her hand slammed into the ground where he had been. The impact blasted dirt and rocks high into the air. The crimson-eyed woman roared, shoving her rival back. Her chest rose and fell, her gaze burning straight at Daniel. She stepped closer. Her shadow fell over him, long and dark. Then her voice came, low and sharp, like a blade drawn in. "The dark, he's mine." The words shook him to the core. The jungle trembled again, and Daniel realized this was only the beginning. The night shook as if the jungle itself feared what was about to come. Daniel pressed his back against the nearest stone ruin, his breath fast and shallow. The two alien women stood face to face, their shadows stretching across the broken earth. The golden-eyed one's hair shimmered like molten fire, her body glowing faintly with each breath. The crimson-eyed one, taller by a head, stood like a mountain of muscle and rage, her eyes burning with pure hunger. They spoke again, their words, heavy and sharp, a language Daniel could not understand but could feel inside his bones. Every sound rattled his chest. Their voices weren't just speech, they were power, shaking the trees, bending the vines, filling the jungle with thunder. The golden-eyed one lunged first. She moved with terrifying speed, her arms swinging like a falling tree. The crimson-eyed one caught the blow with both hands, and the ground split under her heels. The crash sent a shockwave through the clearing. Daniel was thrown onto his side, coughing as dust filled the air. The titans pushed against each other, their muscles straining, their snarls shaking the night. Their claws dug into each other's flesh, glowing blood dripping like molten metal. The sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing, beautiful monsters tearing the world apart. Then, with a roar, the crimson-eyed woman shoved the golden-eyed one back. She flew into a tree as thick as a tower. The trunk cracked in half and crashed to the ground, birds scattering in panic. Daniel scrambled on hands and knees, trying to move farther away, but every direction felt unsafe. If he ran to the left, one of them might crush him in their fury. If he ran right, the other might grab him first. He was trapped in their battlefield. The golden-eyed woman rose from the shattered tree. Her lips pulled back in a smile, sharp teeth glistening. She lifted both arms, and her body glowed brighter. A strange energy spread across her skin, like veins of light crawling under the surface. The crimson-eyed woman snarled. She picked up the fallen tree like a club, swinging it with both hands. The golden-eyed one ducked, and the tree smashed against a ruined stone, exploding into splinters. The sound was deafening. Daniel covered his head, but even then, shards of wood sliced across his arm. Warm blood ran down, and pain jolted through him. He bit down a cry. If they heard him now, he'd be done, but it didn't matter. They already knew. Both alien women froze for a moment, their massive heads turning toward him. Their burning eyes locked onto his wounded arm, his small figure trembling in the dust. The golden-eyed one hissed a word, pointing straight at him. The crimson-eyed one roared, answering in a tone that needed no translation. "Mine!" Daniel's stomach dropped. They weren't just fighting for pride or dominance. They were fighting for him. The golden-eyed one leaped. The ground broke under her feet, and she soared over the ruins like a predator. Daniel gasped, rolling behind a broken pillar as her massive hand struck the stone. The ancient rock exploded into fragments. The crimson-eyed woman tackled her mid-air. Both titans crashed to the ground, shaking the entire jungle. Daniel tumbled forward, dirt in his mouth, ears ringing. His vision blurred as the two alien women wrestled only meters away, their giant limbs tearing the earth apart. He forced himself to crawl, his hands bleeding, his body screaming to move. But no matter how far he crawled, their shadows followed him. The fight turned savage. The golden-eyed one raked her claws across the crimson-eyede's shoulder, leaving glowing wounds that hissed in the night. The crimson-eyed one responded with a crushing blow to the jaw, sending her rival sprawling. For a second, the golden-eyed one lay still. The crimson-eyed woman stood over her, chest heaving, ready to strike the final blow. Daniel's breath caught. If one of them died here, would the other spare him? Or would she claim him like a prize of war? The golden-eyed woman's hand twitched. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, she slammed her fist into the ground. The earth itself answered. A shockwave blasted through the clearing. Trees snapped, rocks flew, and Daniel was thrown backward like a ragdoll. His back hit the ruined wall, stars exploding in his vision. When he opened his eyes again, the two alien women were already on their feet, circling each other, their breaths like thunder, their eyes burning hotter than ever. And then Daniel realized something. Every time they fought, every time their rage exploded, their gazes always flicked back to him. They weren't only trying to kill each other, they wanted him alive. But why? The jungle trembled again as the golden-eyed woman roared and charged. Daniel pressed his bleeding hand against the stone ruin, whispering to himself, "I won't survive this." The giants collided once more, and this time the fight had only just begun. Asterisk. The jungle was breaking apart behind him. Daniel ran. His legs pounded against the damp earth, lungs burning, chest on fire. Every crash behind him was another reminder that two monsters, two alien women, were tearing each other apart. The ground shook like drums. Trees fell, snapping like bones. The night roared with their voices. He didn't look back. He couldn't. If he did, his courage would vanish. But even as he ran, he knew a simple truth. His body was too small, too weak. No matter how fast he sprinted, those 12-foot giants could cross the same distance in a few steps. If they wanted him, they would catch him, unless he found something else. The jungle opened ahead. Moonlight spilled across a clearing where stone ruins jutted from the ground. Old walls, broken pillars, and a single archway stood half buried in vines. Strange carvings glowed faintly on the surface, symbols he didn't understand, but they pulsed like they were alive. He stumbled inside, breathing hard, hands scraping against the cold stone. The air here felt different. Heavy, electric, like a storm trapped in silence. His boots kicked dust that smelled older than time itself. The ruins weren't dead. They were waiting. Behind him, the giants' roars grew louder. Their fight was drawing closer. Daniel ducked behind a fallen block and pressed himself flat. He could hear the giants' footsteps closer, closer. Leaves rained down. The walls shuddered. Then silence. He held his breath. Through a gap in the broken wall, he saw them. The golden-eyed one stood on the edge of the clearing, her body glowing, her breath heavy. The crimson-eyed one emerged opposite her, blood glowing. On her arms, both looked toward the ruins. Toward him. Daniel's pulse raced. If they both came in here, he was finished. The golden-eyed woman stepped forward first, reaching her hand toward the arch. But the moment her fingers touched the stone, a bright flash of light burst from the carvings. She hissed and pulled back, smoke rising from her skin. The crimson-eyed woman laughed a low, cruel sound. She too reached for the arch, but again, the ruins answered. The stone pulsed, rejecting her, forcing her to retreat. Daniel's eyes widened. The ruins didn't want them. But then, something else happened. The carvings on the stone near him glowed brighter. Symbols lit up one by one, in rhythm with his heartbeat. He raised his hand slowly and touched the wall. The stone was warm alive. A shock ran through him. His vision blurred, and for a moment he saw images fleeting, broken pieces of a memory. Not his own. A war. A jungle burning. Giants kneeling before something small. A human. Daniel pulled his hand back, gasping. The glow dimmed, but the wall still pulsed faintly with his breath. The giants had seen it too. Their eyes locked on him, wide with something he hadn't seen before, not just hunger. Not just rage. Fear. The golden-eyed one hissed, speaking fast. Her voice sharp like a blade. The crimson-eyed one snarled back, her tone dripping with venom. They argued, pointing at Daniel, pointing at the glowing walls. Daniel's mind spun. The ruins reacted to him, not them. Why? What did this place know about humans? He didn't have time to think. The golden-eyed woman slammed her fist into the ground, roaring with frustration. The crimson-eyed one responded with a snarl, and they crashed into each other again, this time at the edge of the ruins. The ground split. Stones cracked. Dust poured from the arch. Daniel's survival instinct screamed. If the ruins collapsed, he would be buried alive. He needed to move deeper inside. He forced his legs to work, stumbling through the archway and into a narrow passage. The air was colder here, and the walls glowed brighter as he passed. It was like the ruins wanted him to go deeper. Behind him, the giants' fight grew even louder. Their roars echoed through the jungle, shaking the passage walls. He ran, ignoring the pain in his side, the blood on his arm, the pounding of his head. The corridor bent, twisted, until it opened into a wide chamber. At the center stood a stone pedestal, smooth and glowing faintly. Upon it, a small object rested, a shard of crystal, glowing with the same rhythm as his own heart. Daniel approached slowly, every nerve on edge. His hands shook as he reached out. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, a wave of warmth surged through his body. His wounds burned for a second, then calmed. His vision sharpened. His fear softened. The ruins had given him something. Not strength, not yet, but connection. He heard footsteps behind him, heavy, too heavy. Daniel turned. The crimson-eyed woman's shadow filled the corridor. She had forced her way in, her massive body scraping against the stone. Her eyes glowed like molten fire, locked on him. She was too big for the passage. She had to crouch, shoulders scraping, but she kept moving. Nothing would stop her. Daniel clutched the crystal, his chest tight. His body was shaking, but his voice came out clear. Stay back. The crystal flared in his hand. Light spilled across the walls, across the ceiling, filling the chamber. The crimson-eyed woman froze. For the first time, her eyes widened, not in rage, but in shock. Daniel's breath slowed. He didn't know what he had, but he knew this. For the first time since the crash, he had a weapon. Asterisk. The light from the crystal burned bright, filling the stone chamber with a glow that pushed away the darkness. Daniel's hand shook as he held it, but he noticed something strange. The crystal's glow pulsed like a heartbeat. His heartbeat. The crimson-eyed woman crouched at the entrance, her massive body wedged between the ruined walls. She snarled, her sharp teeth gleaming, but for once she did not move forward. Her glowing eyes were locked on the crystal, and in them Daniel saw something new, not rage, not hunger. Recognition. She muttered a word, low and harsh, her voice rattling the stones. Daniel didn't understand, but the tone chilled him. It was the tone soldiers used when they faced an enemy they had feared in stories, only to learn the stories were real. Before he could move, the ground shook again. A deafening roar echoed down the corridor. The golden-eyed woman had arrived. She shoved aside broken stone like it was nothing, forcing her way into the ruins. Dust rained from the ceiling as the walls trembled under her size. The two titans locked eyes, and once again, Daniel became their center. But the ruins would not allow them to simply fight. The carvings on the chamber walls flared, brighter than before. Symbols spun like fire across the stone, forming patterns that circled Daniel, the crystal, and the women. The air turned heavy, thick, like he was breathing water. The women froze. Their eyes flicked to the walls, then back to each other. Both hissed words in their alien tongue. Daniel couldn't understand, but the message was clear. The ruins had changed the rules. The golden-eyed woman slammed her hand on the floor. The carvings answered with a pulse of light. The crimson-eyed woman growled and did the same. The chamber shook as if it approved or demanded. Daniel's chest tightened. He felt the meaning inside his bones, as if the ruins were speaking not to his ears, but to his blood. This is the challenge. He didn't know how he understood it. The words weren't spoken, but they were clear. The ruins had set terms. If the women wanted him, if they wanted what the crystal had chosen, they had to fight under this ritual. The golden-eyed woman straightened, her breath glowing in the air. Her sharp teeth gleamed as she smirked. The crimson-eyed one snarled, lowering her body like a beast ready to strike. Daniel staggered back, pressing against the pedestal. "No," he whispered. "Not here, not because of me." The ruins didn't care. The chamber floor cracked, splitting in patterns that glowed like rivers of fire. The ground dropped in sections, forming a wide circle around the pedestal. An arena. Daniel stumbled, barely keeping his balance as stone shifted beneath him. Dust rose in thick clouds. The walls shook, but they did not fall. The ruins had prepared for this. The women stepped into the circle, their massive bodies glowing under the light. They were no longer fighting wildly. Now their movements slowed, sharpened, controlled by rules older than either of them. They circled each other like predators, every muscle tense, every breath loud, their eyes burning with more than rage. With purpose. Daniel gripped the crystal tighter. It pulsed harder, his chest pounding with it. He felt the ruins pulling him in, tying him to this ritual. He was not just a bystander anymore. He was the prize, the judge, and maybe even the reason this challenge existed. The golden-eyed woman moved first. She struck low, fast, sweeping her rival's legs. The crimson-eyed one leapt back, her hands slamming down to steady herself. Stone cracked under her touch. She growled, then lunged forward, striking with both hands. The golden-eyed one caught the blow, their fingers locking. The chamber thundered as they pushed against each other, sparks of glowing blood flying where their claws dug into flesh. Daniel shouted, "Stop!" For a split second, both froze. Their heads turned toward him, their massive eyes burning with something dangerous. The ruins pulsed again. The carvings glowed brighter. His voice mattered. Daniel's chest tightened as realization hit. This wasn't just a fight. He had a role. The ruins wanted him to choose, but choose what? The golden-eyed woman snarled, her voice breaking into words he almost understood. "Choose." The crimson-eyed one roared in answer, pointing at him with one blood-stained claw. "Choose." The chamber trembled as their voices shook the air. The ruins demanded his judgment. Daniel's hands tightened around the crystal until his knuckles turned white. His legs trembled. He had no idea what choosing meant: life, death, slavery, freedom. But he knew one thing: both women would obey the ruins. And the ruins had tied his voice to their fate. His heart hammered. Two giants, 12 feet tall, their strength shaking the world, both waiting for one fragile human to speak. He swallowed hard, words forming on his lips, and then the chamber floor split wide open beneath them. The jungle roared. The ruins howled, and the challenge had only begun. The chamber split open with a sound like thunder, stone grinding against stone. Daniel stumbled back as the floor reformed into a circle and arena carved by the ruins themselves. The glowing lines that ran across the ground pulsed with every beat of his heart. The two alien women stood inside the ring, their 12-foot bodies framed by light. The golden-eyed one's skin shimmered like molten silver. The crimson-eyed one bled glowing streams down her arms, but her grin was savage, full of fire. Daniel clutched the crystal tighter. Its glow had merged with his own pulse. He could feel its warmth racing through his blood, whispering to him without words. They fight for you. They obey your voice. The thought chilled him. The women circled, each waiting for the other to move. First, their glowing eyes kept flicking back to him. Not to each other. To him. The golden-eyed woman lunged first. Her claws flashed, cutting through the air with the sound of ripping steel. The crimson-eyed woman ducked low, then slammed her shoulder forward, ramming her opponent back into the wall. The ruins shook. Dust rained down. Daniel shouted without thinking, "Stop!" They froze. Both titans, locked in a deadly embrace, stopped moving as if time itself had obeyed him. Their burning eyes snapped toward him. The crystal in his hand pulsed once. Daniel's breath caught. He whispered again, softer this time, "Move." The giants moved. Not at him, but back at each other, as if his voice had unbound them. His chest tightened. He wasn't just watching. He was inside their fight. The golden-eyed woman swung her arm, claws raking across her rival's chest. Glowing blood sprayed across the arena. The crimson-eyed woman roared in pain, then answered with a brutal kick that sent her rival skidding across the stone floor. Daniel winced. He wanted it to stop, but the ruin seemed to pulse harder, demanding more. The crimson-eyed woman turned toward him, her chest heaving, her voice booming like a drum. "Choose." The golden-eyed one rose, wiping blood from her mouth. Her sharp teeth gleamed as she hissed the same word. "Choose." Daniel shook his head. His voice cracked. I can't." The arena walls glowed brighter, punishing his refusal. The ground shook violently. His legs buckled. The crystal burned in his hand, forcing him to speak. His throat tightened. He shouted, "Defend!" Both women moved instantly, raising their arms in perfect defense, blocking each other's blows like his word had been carved into their muscles. Daniel's jaw dropped. He hadn't chosen one over the other. He had chosen the action. The ruins weren't asking him to pick a champion. They were asking him to guide the fight. The realization sent a shiver through him. He wasn't a prize. He wasn't a slave. He was something else, entirely. The crimson-eyed woman roared again, slamming her rival into the ground. The golden-eyed one hissed, clawing at her throat. They struggled, stone cracking under their massive bodies. Daniel raised the crystal high. His voice rang out, louder this time, "Strike!" The golden-eyed woman's body jolted with sudden power. Her claws slashed upward, tearing across her rival's face. The crimson-eyed one howled, glowing blood streaming down her cheek. Daniel stumbled back, horrified. He hadn't meant it like that. But his command had been obeyed. The crimson-eyed woman's gaze snapped to him, fury and desire burning together. She pointed at him with one bloodied hand. "Yours." She roared. The golden-eyed woman answered with a hiss, her teeth dripping with glowing blood. "Mine." The ruins shook again, urging him to speak, to command, to decide their fate. Daniel's breath came fast. His voice was the weapon. His words were chains. And both women wanted to be bound by him. The crimson-eyed woman lunged again, rapping, her arms around her rival and lifting her like a doll. She slammed the golden-eyed one into the wall, stone exploding outward. Daniel shouted without thinking, "Release!" The crimson-eyed one's arms went slack. She snarled in confusion, her grip forced open by his command. The golden-eyed woman dropped to the ground, panting, eyes burning brighter than ever. She smirked up at him, as if she understood what he was becoming. Daniel's legs shook, his chest pounded. He whispered, almost to himself, "What am I to you?" the ruins answered with silence. But both women, in unison, lowered their heads, not as rivals, not as predators, not as challengers, waiting for his next word. The air thickened, heavy with power, desire, and fear. Daniel realized the truth. This was no longer their fight. This was his trial. The arena's glow pulsed faster, in rhythm with Daniel's heartbeat. Every breath he took echoed in the stone walls. Every word he spoke had weight. The ruins were alive, waiting, listening. The two giant women faced him now, no longer clawing at each other. Their bodies were bloodied, their breaths harsh, but their glowing eyes stayed locked on the human in the center. The golden-eyed one's lips curled into a smile, teeth glistening in the light. "Choose," she hissed, her voice heavy with command. Crimson-eyed one bared her fangs, pounding her chest like a war drum. "Choose." Her roar shook the chamber, spraying dust from the ceiling. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. He could barely stand, his body trembling, but he forced his voice out. "I won't choose." The ruins answered with fury. The carvings along the walls flared so bright they blinded him. The ground shook violently, cracking beneath his feet. His ears rang as if 1,000 voices screamed at once. The crystal in his hand burned like fire. He dropped to one knee, gasping. As visions burst into his mind, flashes of ancient humans standing before giants. A voice like thunder declaring judgment. Women kneeling, chains of light binding their arms. A human lifting a hand, speaking. A single word, and armies falling silent. Daniel clutched his head, sweat pouring down his face. He finally understood. The ruins didn't just want him to pick one woman. They wanted him to claim one, to bind her, to make her his through command. The thought made him sick. He wasn't a master. He wasn't a god. He looked up, his voice breaking. "I won't enslave either of you." The women flinched as if struck. For a brief moment, their monstrous fury faded, replaced by something else: confusion. The crimson-eyed woman stepped closer, her massive hand pressing against the glowing floor. Her voice lowered, almost trembling. "If you do not choose, we are nothing." The golden-eyed one tilted her head, her long hair falling like molten fire. Her voice softened, though her eyes still burned. "The ruins demand bond. Without bond, we die." Daniel's blood ran cold. The ruins weren't just forcing a fight. They were forcing survival. One had to be chosen, or both would perish. The carvings flared again, this time showing clearer shapes in the light, too massive. Forms kneeling before a single human figure. The meaning was carved in stone: submission. Daniel's stomach turned. His whole life he had fought to stay free. Now these women, these towering monsters, were begging for chains, his chains. His voice shook as he stood, the crystal blazing in his palm. "No," he said, "not like this." The ruins pulsed violently, the arena trembling as if the world itself rejected his answer. The women staggered, clutching their chests, their glowing veins flickering like dying fire. The crimson-eyed one fell to her knees, gasping, "Human, choose me, or I burn." The golden-eyed one dropped to one hand, her voice weaker now. "No, choose me, or I fade." Daniel's chest twisted. Both women were kneeling now, their enormous bodies shuddering under the ruins' cruel demand. Their glowing eyes never left him. They weren't rivals anymore. They were victims of the same command that now bound him. The crystal pulsed harder, forcing his lips to move. He clenched his teeth, fighting it. His mind screamed, "There has to be another way." And then, through the haze of pain, an idea cut through. What if the ruins' law wasn't about one or the other? What if the ruins only demanded a bond, but never said it had to be only one? His heart pounded, his throat tightened. He lifted the crystal high, light spilling across the arena. His voice broke like thunder. "I choose, both." The ruins screamed in protest. The chamber walls shook, carvings flashing wildly. The ground split in glowing cracks, energy surging as if the entire jungle roared in outrage. The women gasped, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. But the chains of light that had begun to form around their arms flickered, then split. Instead of binding one and destroying the other, the chains wound around, both pulling them toward him. The crimson-eyed woman snarled, not in anger but in shock. The golden-eyed one laughed, a low, breathless sound. Both knelt fully now, lowering their massive heads before the tiny human. The ruins did not like it. The air hissed with fury. But they could not break what had been spoken. The bond was forged. And for the first time since the crash, Daniel realized something that shook him more than their fight, more than the ruins, more than the chains of destiny. He wasn't their prize. He was their master. The ruins burned with light, a storm trapped in stone. The chains of energy that had bound the women twisted, snapped, and reshaped into something new. No longer shackles of slavery, they became lines of fire connecting them. To him, Daniel stood in the center of the arena, the crystal blazing in his hand. His chest heaved with every breath, his body trembling, but his voice had not been silenced. He had spoken the impossible, both, and the ruins could not undo it. The crimson-eyed woman knelt, her massive hands pressed into the glowing floor. Her shoulders shook, her chest heaved, but her head was bowed to him. The golden-eyed one followed, lowering her towering body with grace, her glowing hair spilling across the stone like molten light. Both giants, 12 feet tall, bowed to a single human. The ruins screamed in fury. Carvings flashed violently, walls shuddered, cracks split the ground. But Daniel held the crystal higher, his voice steady for the first time since the crash. "You don't control me," he said, teeth clenched. "You don't control them. The choice is mine." The crystal pulsed, brighter than ever, answering him with a warmth that filled his bones. For the first time, Daniel felt not like prey, not like a survivor, but like something more, like a man standing on the edge of kingship. The ruins fell silent, the glow dimmed. The chambers stopped trembling. The carvings, one by one, went dark, leaving only the three of them bathed in the light of the crystal. Daniel lowered the shard. His breath steadied. The crimson-eyed woman raised her head slowly. Her glowing eyes burned, not with rage anymore, but with loyalty and something else. A hunger that was no longer just about flesh. The golden-eyed one tilted her head, her lips curling into a slow smile. "Human," she whispered, her deep voice soft as velvet. "Ours." Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to tell them he belonged to no one, but as their enormous shadows closed in behind him, he realized the truth. He wasn't theirs. They were his. The ruins bond had sealed it. The jungle itself had accepted it. The walls cracked open, stone splitting into an exit. A rush of cool night air swept into the chamber. Daniel stepped forward, the crystal glowing faintly in his hand. Behind him, the two giant women rose to their full height, towering over him, their footsteps shaking the ground. No longer rivals, no longer enemies, they moved in perfect step, one at each side. Together, they walked out of the ruins. The jungle waited. The animals that had once screamed now fell silent. Birds perched high in the glowing trees, watching in fear. Predators slunk away into the shadows. Even the insects stilled, their buzzing gone. The jungle bowed. Daniel lifted his head. For the first time since the crash, he wasn't lost. He wasn't small. He wasn't weak. He was the center. The crimson-eyed woman knelt again, lowering her body beside him. The golden-eyed one mirrored her, their massive frames bending like warriors before a throne. Daniel looked at them, his voice low, almost a whisper meant only for himself. Maybe humanity isn't so small after all. The crystal pulsed, as if agreeing. The jungle roared in the distance, but it was no longer the sound of danger. It was the sound of something new rising. Daniel walked forward, two alien queens behind him, their shadows stretching into the endless. Night, and the jungle once wild, once cruel shook not with terror, but with the steps of its new king.